Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing Francis Spufford's novel Cahokia Jazz. I'll talk very briefly about the author, go into a spoiler-free overview of the plot, talk about what I liked about it, what I didn't like about the book, who I'd recommend the book to, and finish off with what I'll be reading for next time. Francis Spufford is an English author who has released several books in his career. He started mostly in the nonfiction vein before moving into more steadily fiction work. He is a professor in England as well. He had some acclaim a few years back with an earlier novel of his. This novel came out in 2023. It's the first of his that I've read. It's something of a unique book in that it's an alternative history detective novel. Very much, it's hard to talk about this book and not talk about Michael Chabon's Yiddish Policeman Union. But there's some similarities between the books in that this book is set in a world where the Native American population is not decimated to nearly the same degree due to smallpox as it is in our world. Because of that, the United States is much more balkanized in the sense of there is a world where power is split between, more evenly split between the Native population, Black African Americans, and white Americans. In this world, there is a state of deseret where the Mormon people have a much larger footprint in the region, in that region that goes well beyond Utah. Alaska is something of a disputed territory. Some other bits and bobs that are implied in the novel that aren't really gone into great detail. So I think one of the best things that he does about this novel, is giving you just enough of the history in order to follow what's going on and to understand the differences without being, inundated with it. Anytime when you're talking about alternative history, it's very difficult to kind of walk the balance. One of my favorite authors, Harry Turtledove, who's the master of alternative history, is the nickname he's oftentimes given. He usually, what he will do, his trick is to basically tell you they call it a divergent point early in the novel, and then basically everything goes from that point forward. Spufford does it a little bit differently here, where he has kind of these interstitial documents from this world that kind of give you bits and bobs of the history of the world and the differences in it. He also has kind of an epilogue where he explains in detail, not in detail, but he basically gives you there was implication of what the difference was throughout the novel, but in case you didn't understand what the difference was, here it is kind of in black and white. And essentially, it's a world that there is much more Native American culture in the culture of North America because it was preserved because there are many more Native Americans in the society. And this novel is set in the 1920s, where there has been a murder at a land trust, and there are two detective characters who are part of the Cahokia police department, which is they're within a state that is largely Native peoples, that is part of a larger United States. And there's worry that this is set in roughly St. Louis, essentially. In our world, it would be St. Louis. And this murder, as it often does, is it sets off a long investigation, and there's a political dimension to it, where this is something of a tinderbox of a situation. And if this murder isn't solved, then it's going to have strong reverberations throughout the society and cause to a lot of societal collapse. Our main character is a piano player who is half Native American and half black. I believe his name is Barrow, and he has a partner who he met in the war. This is World War I. So the two of them have become recently police officers in this timeline in this city, and they're investigating this crime. And so it's relatively boilerplate detective fiction, but I think Spufford does a very good job of making the place feel real. That's one of the highlights of the book, is this city feels like a real place with its own culture and its own location. There's a map in the novel that I thought was very helpful to kind of lay out where everything is, and everything kind of makes sense for this novel. There are kind of pretty standard detective tropes that I think he handles well and twists them enough in this to make it an interesting novel. If there are things that I didn't like as much, I thought the pacing was quite good. I thought the ending was solid. There's some stuff on the peripheral that I think he could have gone into more detail with. there's like the broader political world that this is in. I think there's not a lot of time really spent on that as much to my satisfaction. I wish there's maybe more spent there. Some of the fight scenes I think could have been better. There's a couple of fight scenes that could have been, I think, both written better, paced better. The outcome of them. There's one scene in particular. It wasn't quite clear exactly what was going on, and I found that a little frustrating. But that's a pretty minor degree. There's some dialogue issues where I don't know how realistic it is for some of these characters to have these like long monologues. But again, that's kind of a stylistic thing. But overall, I enjoyed it. It is very much, if you enjoy detective novels, then I think you're going to enjoy this. It's pretty boilerplate. It may sound very dismissive, and I don't intend it to be. I think it does what it's supposed to do. It gets in, gets out. It's not super, super long. I think it's paced relatively well. There's some qualms I had with some of the writing, and there's qualms I had with some of the broader world, and some of the writing is weaker in some spots than others. But if you enjoy a detective novel and wanted to something that's a little bit of a twist on that formula, I think this does a good job of it. I think there's a couple places where he does a good job of kind of giving you the culture of this place. I wish there was maybe more synthesis of cultures, I guess is the term I would use. There are times where I wish there was more of a synthesis of the native culture with the white culture, with the black culture, and that kind of goes a little bit missing in this. It's not there to the degree that one may think it would be. Again, if you are a fan of Michael Chabon's Yiddish Policeman's Union and you're looking for something to fill kind of a similar space, it's hard to talk about this book without talking about that. Michael Chabon, in that book especially, to me, has greater literary goals than I think Spufford does here. I think this book is much more in the vein of alternative history and in the vein of a detective novel, and doesn't really aspire to be a great piece of literature that, in quotes, that Chabon oftentimes does. But if you liked that and you wanted something that was maybe less literary fiction and more mainstream fiction, then I think you'll like this. Overall I enjoyed it quite a lot, and I thought it was well done. And I think people who will enjoy detective fiction and or want like a twist on a detective story, I think this does a good job of doing that. Francis Spufford, Cahokia Jazz. And I think it's a good character study of the main character, who, like I said, is a jazz piano player who's also a detective, who's also kind of an orphan character, and kind of seeing his search for a greater family and sense of belonging in this city, I thought was a fun journey as well. So, I would say it's a detective novel. There is murder, there's violence, but it's pretty tame, I think. I'd say it's PG-13 violence. I think you could probably give this to a high school senior, and I think they would enjoy it. And I don't think there's anything super gratuitous that would maybe make me give it a second thought to someone. There's a couple gory parts, but they're relatively minor. And I think, if someone has seen an R-rated movie, they've seen probably worse than this book. So to give you a sense of what the audience is for, again, if you like detective fiction, if you tolerate alternative history, and I don't think you actually have to get wrapped up in like the Divergent Point and all that. That I think is something for alternative history fans. If you're not an alternative history fan and you just want an interesting story about a crime in this world where Native American people are a larger part of the population, you'll enjoy this book. So Francis Spufford, Cahokia Jazz. Not sure exactly what I'll be reading next time. I had someone from the channel reach out to offer me to read something that they wrote, so I will probably be reading that. Until next time, please, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed this. And until next time, I'll leave my Twitter below. Until next time, bye.